Hey all, I'm sure you've had some tempura at some point in your life, and if not, try it now. It's a light, crispy batter, Japanese cuisine, and it's usually used to coat vegetables, meat. I wouldn't even be surprised if Oreos or other desserts are dipped in tempura batter and made into a nice fusion, crispy golden brown dessert. And while it's easy to make, it's also easy to mess up. So we'll make a couple of tempuras today with a number of vegetables. We'll also do shrimp. I'll show you how to break the shrimp, how to get your shrimp tempura, which is great in sushi cones or in sushi rolls. And one of my all-time favorite sushis actually, it's with cream cheese and fried yams or yam tempura. That is to die for. So let's take a look at it now. Now there are different types of flours you can use to make the tempura. Some include cornstarch with wheat flour. Some include rice flour with just regular flour. I'm making mine with just rice flour. And in this bowl here, I have my rice flour along with some leavening agent, in this case baking powder, that helps to get the breading puffy and helps it to get light and crispy as it's frying. Also, a pinch of salt goes a long way. Of course, you can season it to your liking, but usually it's served with some sort of salty sauce. So you don't really have to over season the tempura. If you're pairing it with other elements like soy sauce or spicy mayo, for example, that already has a lot of flavor. And for the wet ingredients, I have some egg whites and some ice cold water. Now, traditionally, the full egg is used, but the whites without the yolk will help to actually keep the breading lighter and help it to get crispier. Now don't mix anything yet. You want to make sure that you mix and make the batter at the very end, because if the tempura batter has settled, if it warms up, it's not going to be the same. It's going to split, and no matter how much more you mix it, it just won't be the same. So let's look at the veggies that I have prepped and then look at the shrimp. The yams are sliced up along with the eggplant, zucchini, and some shiitake mushrooms, which I'm going to be frying whole. The shrimp is another story. For the shrimp, you need to make sure that you've deshelled them if they have shells, and then you have to devein them. And that's going to be on the underside, that black line, get that out. So to break the shrimp, you want to put light pressure, and you don't want to go straight into your cutting board surface or your work surface. You need to have a bit of a gap as you're pressing down on the shrimp to essentially break its back and straighten it. You're forcing it to straighten. And by putting some light pressure and pushing down against your work surface will help you achieve that. Don't be worried if you break a couple. I have broken maybe dozens of them while learning how to do this. Use a knife, make a slit, and then painstakingly, unfortunately, pluck it out. Ingredients are ready. Now let's mix the wet with the dry, or is it dry with the wet? Now that's a great question, and there is a difference, and I'm going to show you both ways. Now, traditionally, what is used to make tempura batter is that you mix dry with the wet, and you mix very, very lightly, and you keep the lumps in there. That helps to get a nice crispy, flaky texture when you're frying. The oil, by the way, needs to hover around 340 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly 170 to 180 degrees Celsius. Now let's say you don't have a thermometer that can measure that. Fine. Most cases what I do is I take a sample, I coat it, and I fry it. And if it turns out really greasy, then that means your oil is not hot enough, so your batter absorbed a lot of the oil. And now let me show you what the consistency and the fry looks like when I mix the wet with the dry instead of dry with the wet. Now, adding wet to dry is what most bakers use in multiple different cuisines, and it really helps to watch how much liquid you're adding as you're mixing so that everything mixes well together. Well, that actually is not great for tempura batter, because tempura batter needs to have those lumps, needs to be very lightly mixed, because over mixing ruins the texture. Those lumps is what helps contribute towards the flaky light texture. The less you mix, the better the batter. And that is why in this other case, adding dry to wet, well, you have a bit more control over the final texture and the thickness and the consistency, because you're adding dry to wet and only mixing just as much as you need to get just the right texture. Now, frying for some is the easiest part, and if not, then always remember, if you're unsure, always fry away from your face or your hands. Now, I'm going to start with the shrimp first, the all-time favorite type of tempura for me. And the batter is the most authentic version where we mix the dry with the wet. And you can see the lumps already all around. And again, as I said, fry away from you. And honestly, with something like tempura, you don't want the shrimp to just sink to the bottom before it rises up as the breading puffs up. So just hold the tip, hold the tail, and then kind of wave and swing the actual shrimp that's breaded around the oil, and then you'll see it puffing up. And once you see it puffing up, that means there's enough air from the puffing in the tempura for the shrimp to just float, and that way you won't lose any breading at the bottom of your wok. And these will only take maybe 1 to 3 minutes to cook, and I promise they will be super crispy. I'm also going to be making an assortment of other tempuras, and in this case I'm making it with the other batter where we mixed the wet with the dry. It's a little different because you just need more work to combine everything together, because the dry is all sunken at the bottom. Now, I'm not going to say if you're super careful that you can't get the same results by mixing wet with dry. I'm just saying it's easier to get there by mixing dry with the wet, because at the end each platter looked crazy good. And you have to listen to this crunch. Now, let's say you want to prep this ahead of time, then you can do that. It's a bit more calorie dense if you choose to prep it ahead of time, because at the restaurant that I used to work at, when it was going to be a busy night, we would pre-fry the tempuras until it had a very light golden brown coating. It wasn't crispy yet. And then when it's time for the order, then you fry it a second time, almost like making French fries, I guess, at home. And that helps to get the right crispy texture. So you can adjust based on what your needs are, but ideally you just make this to order, fresh, and it's never going to be the same if you hold it. Also, if you notice that the batter has settled and you still haven't fried yet, then unfortunately, to get the best results, don't overmix it. Don't try to reconstitute the batter consistency. Just make a new batch and fry it fresh, and always try to make the batter at the last minute. I also noticed that the breading was a little crispier, and it had a nice flaky light texture for the batter that we made the most authentic way, dry with the wet. And you have to listen to this crunch. Talking about that, these veggies are looking great. These shrimps are looking oh so good. And yes, I will be making some nice homemade sushi cones. Not these shrimps, freshly made as I advised to you earlier. So be sure to come right back to see more tempura action, more Japanese action. And if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed these tempuras, let me know down below, and stay tuned for way more to come. I'll see you all on the next one.